Looks like everyone's coming in here. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
It's good to see all your faces. I think maybe we'll wait one more minute and then Trudy will get us started.
Maybe you could unshare your screen so we could see people's faces, Reba.
Good idea. There we go. Look at that.
Yeah.
And maybe what I'll do is I'll put that and I'll put, if people want to check out the agenda, I'm going to put it over in the chat bar there. So you could click that open anytime you want to check into it.
Thank you.
Hi, Penny.
This is where I wish we had music in the background, you know, something to.
You can always put something on.
What kind of music would you like? Next time I'll plan to sing.
Bread and roses. We just sang that at church last week. That was
It's a good one.
Oh, I didn't change my name.
Trudy, I've lost track of you. Where are you in here? Oh, there she is.
On my screen, I'm right next to you.
Okay, well, I'll spotlight you, Trudy, to get us started.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Trudy Ferland. Julia Fitzrandolph and I co-facilitate UU the Vote Maine. Thank you for being here rather than being outside enjoying this beautiful day or glued to the historic pageantry in London. As this is Musan's only network meeting before the midterms, we're fortunate to have the opportunity to hear from and be inspired by guest speakers Jason Hicks and Desti Homan Sprague. Lane Sturdivant will describe actions we can take here in Maine. But before we begin, a couple of thank yous. And first, I want to thank the Congregational Voting Liaisons, or the CVLs. They've been meeting every week to facilitate communication and partnership between the UU community and our key partners. This meeting and our electoral and reproductive justice work could not happen without the support of Reba Richardson, Musan's administrative coordinator. Thank you, Reba. And now we'll begin with a chalice lighting by Reverend Marty Pellman.
Thank you. I have brought a chalice lighting and a blessing for y'all today. The chalice lighting is by Reverend Jamie Yandel. We light this flame to ignite the sacred power of justice. We light this flame so that it may be a beacon of hope in moments of uncertainty, fear, anxiety, and the unknown. We light this flame and are emboldened by its blaze, knowing our strength as a prophetic and powerful people is rooted in the diverse ways we answer the call to love. And a blessing by Reverend Karen Johnson. We will get through, not unscathed to be sure. Too much has been already lost. Too many beloveds have been lost. So not unscathed, but a new kind of whole, the kind that only emerges from the going through it, from the wrestling with it, from the demanding something in exchange for what we lose, making clear what we claim, making clear what we demand in return is not personal gain or revenge, but a blessing. Shaped by our loves and our losses, our sorrows and our joys, our failures and our triumphs, a blessing shaped by our bodies and minds, by our singing and dancing, by our praying and listening, by the beauty we persist in co-creating, the justice we insist upon, a blessing, shaped by our dedication to the values that shape us, unremitting compassion, a joyful and radical inclusion, a preferential option for the poor and marginalized, a deep and wide dismantling of white supremacy, honoring the great mystery of life with appreciation and humility, and with a commitment to collective liberation that frees all, a blessing for all.
Thank you, Marty, so much. Well, it is wonderful to see all your faces, so many people here from all over the state, and a couple people from outside of the state too. It's really wonderful. So I am going to share the agenda right now. Probably most of you saw it when you came in, but just in case you didn't, I'm gonna re-share it so you get a glimpse of it. I also put it in the chat bar. And if you joined after I shared it in the chat bar, let me know and I will send it to you again. So we're going to start off with an update from Julia, letting us know about what is going on with UU The Vote Maine. We've had a really great group of people working together, and Julia will fill us in on that. And then, like Trudy said, we're lucky to hear from Jason Hicks and Dusty Homan Sprague. And that is really exciting, and we're honored to have them here. And then we'll hear a little bit we'll have time for question and answer with both of them. And then Lane will be updating us on some sort of actionable steps right here in Maine. And then we'll have breakout rooms and get a chance to really talk more directly about what folks are doing from other congregations and what you might be interested in doing in your congregation. And then we'll come back together and have a couple other important updates about a very exciting upcoming 10th anniversary celebration for Mooson, and about our new ways that we're engaging with stewardship within Mooson. So we're so glad you're all here. A couple technical things. One, if you are not, I'm going to be keeping an eye on if you could stay muted, basically, unless you have a reason to speak. And I'll go, because often background noise can be distracting. So I'll go through and mute folks if I notice that you're not muted. And then if for some reason you just speak, please unmute yourself. If you have any sort of tech issues, feel free to send me a chat, or I'll put my phone number over in the chat box too, in case anybody is having trouble gets kicked off Zoom and can't get back on. You can get in touch with me on my personal phone. And I don't think there's anything else. Does anybody have any questions before we hand it over to Julia? Any technical questions? Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. And here's Julia.
Here's Julia. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm so excited about the work that Mooson is doing to address one of the more challenging elections in our lifetime, just to make sure we're all grounded in what Mooson is all about. We are the statewide advocacy and public policy network that's anchored in our Unitarian Universalist faith, and of course animated by our principles. And we are the only statewide connection for UU churches in Maine. And so we find that we're challenged as well as blessed by having participation from all of our churches, not only about advocacy, but about our faith and how we can be more present and relevant in this challenging world and environment. So UU the Vote Maine is Musan's electoral justice initiative for the 2022 midterm elections. We have a goal of ensuring fair elections, advancing voting rights, protecting abortion access, and resisting and targeting and criminalization of Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. We have liaisons from many of the main UU congregations, and they participate in a weekly UU the Vote Zoom meeting. We share information and learn about grassroots organizing and educational opportunities of our key partners, which include UU the Vote National and the League of Women Voters of Maine and others. We share resources and activities and specific challenges for these CVLs, as we call them, congregational voting liaisons, and they're available on an online hub that we've created for them that they can go in and access and then make available to all of you, depending upon what your church is interested in or needs to know more about. We also have a very robust website that's open to the public, and there is a specific UU the Vote Take Action tab that lists a variety of actions that we can take all over, in fact, all over the country, if that's something you're individually interested in. I think that's it. I think we're going to be honored with our guest speakers today. And what I want you all to be aware of is that they've agreed to about 10 minutes of a presentation, and then we're going to have 15 minutes of Q&A that we're going to manage in the chat. And Trudy is going to monitor the chat and then come back to our speaker and try to round up if like they're duplicate questions or whatever. And so we have 15 minutes of that with each of our speakers. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Howard, our CVL from the Allen Avenue Church in Portland, to introduce our first guest speaker, Jason Hicks. John?
Hello, everyone. I have the distinct pleasure to introduce our first guest speaker, Jason Hicks, who is tied to why I'm personally involved in Musan, our state advocacy organization, which is the success of our 2020 UU the Vote campaign. We all learned so much that year, and it was clear we needed a national campaign manager of vision and experience moving us into the critical midterm election year. Jason Hicks is that person. Jason Hicks ran for school board while still in high school in southern New Jersey. That campaign, which he lost by 62 votes, gave him his passion for organizing. Though not a UU himself, he applied for this position because he was, as he says, drawn to the spirituality of UU the Vote's ideals. And this example of how faith-based organizing can both build real power and weave a compelling vision of a more just and loving world. And in fact, his clarification of what organizing is, since I tend to be more of the worker bee sort, was really insightful for me. It is building power within a community that lasts even after you're gone. Organizing is nurturing relationships that connect people. Organizing is cultivating hope where it has been lost and amplifying the voices of those who are believed to be voiceless. We are very lucky to have him, and I present you Mr. Jason Hicks.
Thank you so very much, John. And thank you, Musan. Thank you, Maine, for the invitation. I'm so honored to be here today and join with you. You all are my official first stop of this week of action. I just got off the plane and checked in to Michigan. As you know, we're having our first week of action in Michigan. I just got here. So this is my official first stop. You guys get to hear from me first, and I'm really excited to speak with you all today. So again, thank you for having me. Just talking about this week of action that we're having. I chose Michigan as our first stop in this fall campaign, this push, this race to election day, to the midterms, because they have the ballot initiatives that are so important. And the Reproductive Freedom for All Act and the Promote the Vote Act. Reproductive Freedom for All is solidifying abortion, excuse me, in the Michigan Constitution, and Promote the Vote is reinforcing voting rights in the Michigan Constitution. What we've seen from this primary season especially, and in the days and weeks following especially the attack on the Capitol on January 6th, is that we are in a moment that is extremely hyper-partisan. It is red or blue, it is Democrat or Republican, it is right or wrong. In that time, in this moment, the reason I wanted to name this Meeting the Moment is that we at UU The Vote have an opportunity to organize in a different way, to organize based on not tribalism, but to organize based on our values, our faith, our beliefs, our driving forces. So what we've seen from this primary season is that voters are more and more interested in values. One of the most important issues for voters is threats to democracy, voting rights, abortion access, things that aren't left or right, red or blue. So with that, UU The Vote has an incredible opportunity to flex our values muscle. We as an organization, UU The Vote as an organization, pride ourselves on having conversations that lead with love. And this election cycle is our opportunity to speak to the voters more in-depthly, not just about what we believe for our faith, but what we believe for our democracy. And we have such an incredible opportunity to speak to voters all over the country. And we're going to organize everywhere. We're going to try everything. We've seen this primary season from Alaska to Kansas to New York to Pennsylvania, all over the country. There is no such thing as a safe state anymore. There is no such thing as a safe seat. We need to meet voters where they're at and have conversations with them, have dialogues. And that is why I'm here. That's why I'm in Michigan. That's why I am the campaign manager of UU The Vote, because there's something so important about those conversations. There is something so important about talking to voters. There is something so important about getting them to vote, not just because we told them to, but because they believe in what we're fighting for. They believe in this democracy. They believe in the rights to get an abortion. They believe in the right to vote. So I've come to Maine to ask you to keep fighting. Keep having those difficult conversations. Keep having those inspiring conversations. Keep writing postcards. Keep sending letters. Jump on a phone bank. Maybe set up a canvas. Set up a political education event. Have the conversations. It's the conversations that drive UU The Vote. It's the conversations that drive this democracy. So I want to say thank you to you all, because you're already doing the work. Thank you for already talking to your community, organizing the entire state of Maine into Moosan. You're already doing such an incredible job. And I just want to light a little bit more of a fire under you. We are at 60 days to the election, maybe less than that. It's been a while, I was on a plane. We are 3-ish months from one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime. And I know now is the time that people might want to start talking about a particular candidate, a particular party. And I understand that. My background comes from electoral politics. But what we're doing at UU The Vote is more than electoral politics. We're building power for the future, for beyond. We are building our capacity in communities. We're organizing communities and we're fostering those relationships that last even beyond November. We're having those conversations now, yes, to get people to vote, but to also keep them engaged in this work that we're doing. Because this work that we're doing, it cannot stop on November 8th. This work that we're doing cannot stop when the polls close. That's when it begins. That's when the real work begins. Having these conversations, even when there's nobody on the ballot. organizing our communities, leading with love. So we have to meet this moment. We have to make more phone calls than ever before, speak to more voters than ever before, knock on more doors than ever before, write double the postcards that we've ever written, because our democracy is quite literally on the line. Our way of life is on the line. The right to vote is on the line. Abortion access is on the line. LGBTQ rights are on the line. Black and brown lives are on the line in 2022 on the ballot. So keep that in mind. I know the work is hard. I know it gets frustrating. I know sometimes you want to give up and throw in the towel and just turn politics or whatever we call this, turn it off completely and read a book. I like books too. But we're so close. We're so close, 60 days-ish, 60-ish days, semi-Albuquerque eventually, to one of the most consequential elections of our lifetime. So Musan, we have to meet this moment. We have to keep leading with love. We have to keep siding with love. We have to keep you the voting. We have to keep having conversations. We have to keep going because we cannot afford to slow down and stop. We cannot afford it. And I already see from the people here that you're not stopping. You're going to keep going. And I thank you so much for that. And I thank you for continuing the work. So that's my stop. Thank you so much for having me. Keep doing the work. Keep you the voting. Keep siding with love and keep pushing forward. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, Jason. I'm inspired. I'm on fire. I would like all of us now to, this is an open forum for you to ask any and all questions of Jason. Please put them in the chat. Trudy is going to monitor it. And this is the conversation that we're going to have with Jason now. So please don't be shy.
I can handle it. And if I can't handle it, I'll send you an email after I figure it out.
So, Jason, could you tell us the most compelling success story of the last few months in terms of the progress that you're seeing?
It's a great question. Most compelling success story. Well, I could always use some more. So this is going to be my my push to make sure you're reporting in the stories and report form what you're doing out in the community, so I can hear what everyone is doing. And if you don't have that, I will find it and I'll put it in the chat when I'm done. Great question. I mean, there is a lot of work going on. I probably should have had like a form open so I could see. Well, so far, I'll say overall, we've made about 25,000 phone calls, or I'm sorry, we made about 11,000 phone calls, maybe 15,000, and we sent about 25,000 postcards. We have organized dozens and dozens of local meetings like this. We have built up new state action networks that are still getting started. State action networks like Kentucky. State action networks are being strengthened in New Hampshire. We're making new connections in these states. We're building a state action network in Georgia right now to reach voters there. We are planning events. We are going door to door in Pennsylvania. There's a lot of work going on. Of course, I'm drawing a blank on what the most compelling thing is, but I think most compelling overall is UU's willingness to do this work in a midterm election when people are kind of bored of politics now. That is compelling to me. Not losing the fight, not losing your fire, not losing your drive, and keeping it grounded in your values, even when it's so easy to start fighting over other things. But that is what's compelling to me, is that our faith is still driving us. Even when we can give up all hope, our faith is still driving us, and it's still pushing us to be better.
Thank you, Jason. The next question comes from Anne, and she asks if you could give an example of how to start a conversation about UU the vote.
Yeah. well, most people are Unitarian Universalists. Like you heard, I was raised Baptist. I'm now non-denominational. So we talk about our faith a little bit differently. I think I guess there's two aspects to this question. You the vote and your faith, and also how your faith leads to your voting, to what you believe in democracy. So I think the connection there is when you're having a conversation with a voter, whether that be over the phone or just somebody in your community that you know hasn't voted before, you can say that I'm a UU. As a UU, I believe this, this, and that, and because of that, I believe in the right to vote. I believe in the access to abortion, and I exercise those beliefs by doing UU the vote, which is my Unitarian values in action in the electoral process, in the community, in organizing. So there's that's the line that you can draw. I would start with values, go to democracy, and then tie it together as UU the vote does in one little package.
Well, one of our friends, a member of the steering committee, actually wonders if you've ever considered becoming a UU minister. And so the next question is, are there materials to support our outreach to lead with love?
Yeah, I mean, there's the UU the Vote guide, I think is a good place to start. UU the Vote website has some issue statements. We're going to be making phone calls soon. I'm going to be rolling out the national calendar on the 17th, so a week from today, show you all the phone banks, text banks, and events that we have planned from now until November. But if you need like talking points or things like that, or if you have a question about where the UUA stands or where our UU the Vote stands on a certain issue, send us an email. I'll dig in for you. I'll find something in the deep bowels of Google Drive or on the UUA website that reinforces what we're doing. So if that's something that you think would be helpful for these conversations, send me an email and we can work together and we can build a main specific talking point sheet for how you talk to voters. But when we do have like partner phone banks and when we have like text banks, usually the partner will provide information about what we're talking about. And then, you know, when we confirm it, we're making sure that it aligns on that end. But if you're doing your own separate outreach and you want something, that's where we can work together.
Well, this question maybe wades into the weeds a little bit in that we don't support actual candidates, but Priscilla is wondering if we'll support local stars in any way, like her neighbor Craig Hickman. She wants to continue to see him rise in electoral politics. But how do we walk that line?
So there's two ways to walk it. As a C3 organization, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, UU the Vote cannot ever endorse a candidate. What you do in your own personal individual time is it's what you do. You don't have to be branded with UU the Vote. You don't have to say, I'm doing this on behalf of UU the Vote. You as a UU are allowed to do whatever you want, really, that is rooted in your values. If you are saying that my values lead me to knock doors for my local candidate, you can do that. We just can't endorse that because we can't endorse really any candidate at all. But that doesn't mean you can't do any work for them. I guess that's the line I want to draw. You can do anything in individual capacity that you would like to, and I encourage that because I truly believe we should be uplifting people who are running for office who share our values. I know that in my capacity as UU the Vote campaign manager, I cannot lift them up, but I think having an organization, not an organization, but a group of people who are connected through Unitarian Universalism supporting a candidate would be very powerful.
And Jason, this is Julia. I think another thing we can do as part of our C3 work and with our partnerships, particularly here in Maine with the League of Women Voters, we can host candidate forums where we bring in candidates from all of the parties, and on the basis of asking questions about our values and having them answer to the public what their beliefs are. And that's another way we can highlight candidates and still participate in our C3 informing and educational opportunities.
Absolutely. Yeah. Candidate forums are okay. The one thing I would just be wary of is try to stay away from asking like leading questions or like questions that is going to intentionally make another candidate look bad. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I know what we're saying, like we're going to ask questions about our values, which is great, which is what we should do. Just try to stay away from looking like we're bullying another candidate and make it like trying to intentionally make them look bad. But other than that, candidate forums are free game. And if anyone is still, if they need it, I have the slideshow from a couple months back, the real rules, things we're allowed to do as C3 organizations. It was led by Reverend Rob Keithan of All Souls DC. Another title was Prophetic, Not Partisan. So if anyone needs that, shoot me an email and I will send that slideshow out so that you know exactly what's allowed and what's not allowed.
Thank you. And actually, Priscilla says, wonderful answer. Thank you. Reba, how are we doing on time?
Oh, we're doing just fine on time. We have another 10 minutes if
Oh,
folks
great.
still
Okay.
have questions.
Yeah. And this question comes from Betsy. Is you the vote cards, calls, etc., focused exclusively on statewide referenda? How do you target these outreach efforts?
Yes, in certain states, it is. So for Michigan, we will be calling voters about specifically the ballot initiatives, making sure they understand what these are and that you can vote on them. When we're not calling about specific ballot measures, constitutional amendments, things of that nature, we'll most likely be doing get out the vote calls to let people a couple of things to let them know that they can either vote by mail, vote early, and let them know how to vote on election day, make a plan to vote and all that stuff. When we partner with an organization in a state, we do have targeting guidelines so that we are talking to people who are low propensity voters, but have medium-ish support for our values. I cannot say that we're only going to talk to Democrats, we're only going to talk to independents, because I don't even want to know that data. Like I tell them, don't tell me political party, but I give them some parameters. And then they give me a list of usually, again, low propensity voters, people who have voted before, but probably not recently, and might need another push to the ballot box. So it is 100% targeted. It's just not targeted by party, but it is targeted by values.
That makes things easier. It's hard to make a phone call unless you know that.
I know exactly what you were going to say. Yeah.
Related to the question about candidates, and this is from Jane. I understand talking to people about their values, but where does that conversation go without bleeding over into a particular candidate's platforms? For example, someone says, abortion rights are my priority. If one candidate is for abortion rights and one for abortion restrictions, do we just say, ask your candidate what they think on the subject?
We can lead people to their candidate's website and let them know that there is a pro-abortion and an anti-abortion candidate in this race. What gets a little tricky is when we say we are for X candidate. But if we're like for that example, that's a great example. You can say that there is a pro-abortion and an anti-abortion candidate on the ballot in November. Yeah, do some research to determine who you should vote for. But there is a pro-abortion and an anti-abortion. Usually issues like that are pretty blatant on their website. So it is a little, it does have the voter do a little bit more work, which can be tough, but also can be good for the voter and good for us because we're getting people a little bit more in the political landscape, digging them a little bit deeper.
So can I just clarify that?
Mhm.
So are you saying that we should not be saying Jane Smith is for reproductive justice or abortion rights and Joe Blow is not? We can't say that?
Depending on who you ask, I try to stay a little bit more cautious with mine. I would prefer you say there is a pro-abortion candidate, there's an anti-abortion candidate. But other people who you might ask, well, might say that what you just did was okay. But I am a little bit more cautious in that arena. But I can definitely see a world in which that is completely okay.
Thank you.
Trudy,
Yep.
I think unless we have any other compelling questions, we've been blessed with Jason's time and insights. We have one more chat notice that I think we should lift up, and that is Marcy Makinen is very involved in the Maine Poor People's Campaign, and we want to make sure that the Maine Poor People's Campaign is a resource and can help us lift up those voices of the folks most impacted by the issues that we care so much about. Marcy, would you like to just say hello and introduce yourself to Jason so that he knows you and how maybe you all can connect as well?
Sure. Hi, Jason. My name is Marcy Mackin and I live in Portland. And I've been part of the Maine Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee since 2016. And we are passionate about reaching folks who have never voted, particularly poor and low income voters, people who don't show up to the polls because they don't hear anything relevant to the issues that are truly impacting their lives. And we believe that when people are spoken to and their questions are answered, that they will know who to vote for, once they have the languaging and the understanding. And also we also are passionate about the interconnectedness of all the issues. For example, when the abortion issue came up, I thought about that connection to poverty, and who's going to be who needs abortions, and for those that aren't able to access them, what's the impact on their lives, and who are those people? And there's just so many other ways that to show, like who's left out, who's included, who's left out, and who's impacted, ways to talk about policy without telling people how to vote. So anyways.
No, you're 100% right. That's what I love about the Poor People's Campaign. I love tying it back to, I don't want to say anti-capitalism, because I'm not 100% sure about that, but definitely anti-poverty. So I really love and a lot of the work that we do is intersectional. I know you either vote, we are democracy and voting rights, but everything is voting rights, everything is democracy, everything. So yes, intersectionality is amazing. I worked with the Poor People's Campaign a little bit before. I actually what day is it? Saturday. I got an email from someone on Thursday trying to reconnect about the Poor People's Campaign. So this is just a spiritual confirmation that I need to go and respond to that email and set some things up. So thank you so very much for lifting that up.
Thank you again. Thanks, Marcy. Thanks, Trudy, for monitoring. Thanks all of you who participated in the chat. And thank you, Jason, so much. You really have helped us be grounded in our faith and our advocacy and our long haul.
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me. I'm just going to remind everyone again that this is the week of action in Michigan. So if you want to sign up for a phone bank, text bank, trend bank, or the rally, where we're going to be rolling out the entire Youth the Vote calendar, you can sign up at the link I just dropped in the chat. So again, thank you so much, Maine. Thank you so much, Musan, for all the work that you're doing. I know this is your last meeting before the midterms, but if you ever need anything else, you know how to reach me.
Thank you again. And we'll be in touch, not to worry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one, everyone.
All right, bye. Well, take a deep breath now if we have an exciting opportunity. And I'm going to turn over the introduction of our next guest speaker to Nancy Dix, who is our CVL from our Yarmouth UU Church.
Good morning. For months, I've heard pundits claim that women in America are on fire following the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe. I count myself in that number, and I have been looking for ways to channel my outrage into meaningful action. Our next speaker can help us with that work. Dusty Holman Sprague has been the executive director of the Maine Women's Lobby since 2020. Prior to that position, Dusty served for 11 years with the Maine Coalition Against Sexual Assault. She is well-versed in women's issues in Maine. Dusty is passionate about organizational infrastructure, policies, and practices which reflect anti-oppression and feminist values. She believes that Maine should be a place where all people can live free from misogyny and gender-based discrimination. We are so excited to have her with us today. Please join me in welcoming Dusty Holman Sprague.
Welcome.
Good morning, friends. I'm so grateful to be here with you today. And as Nancy said, I'm Dusty Holman Sprague. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm here representing the Maine Women's Lobby. Since 1978, we have advocated at the state level and national level for gender equity through all of the spheres of women's lives and the lives of people who are affected by misogyny and sexism. So whether that is health and reproductive access, economic justice, representation, civil rights, we really work to make sure that we cover that whole sphere. So I'm going to share my screen and hope that this works out. Are we all seeing the same thing? And if I click forward, are we seeing this? Okay, great. I've got some nods. You always think it's going to work, doesn't always. So at the Women's Lobby, we use the legislative and electoral processes to build a more gender just Maine, especially for those who are most affected by the harms of sexism and misogyny. We know that that is primarily women, but it is not only women. We really want to center the experience of trans folks, queer folks, LGBTQ folks, who also experience those harms, and particularly people of color who experience sexism and misogyny alongside the racism that is sort of steeped in our culture. So I know that you at the UU share those same values of dismantling oppression and forming a more just society. So we are on the same side of this age-old effort, and I'm so happy to be in community with you today, this morning. I know that for folks in this work, it's a scary time. As Jason said, not only in the United States, but internationally, there's a creep toward authoritarianism and backsliding of democracy. Here in the US, we've gone so far as to elect an anti-democratic president who threatens to run again, apparently with continued widespread support. We also see the ways that and have the studies to back up our fears that social media is making our world angrier and more extreme, more intolerant, more distrustful. And from a gender equity lens, we see these same trends. We know that there's a rise in misogynist memes and themes. The Me Too movement that was so hopeful when it started has begun to feel as though it's stalling out. Women continue to be unpaid caregivers for nearly every family at some point in our lives, whether it's for a new baby or an aging parent. And yet that was the first program on the chopping block in the Build Back Better proposal. And we continue to be the only country in the world without a system of, the only developed country without a system of paid family and medical leave. As one article said last winter, other countries have safety nets. America has women. And the decision in Dobbs v. Jackson this spring, overturning Roe v. Wade and our 50-year framework for reproductive choice feels like the peak of this trend. It feels like the centerpiece in the national reaction against the progress that we are working for. That decision looks back at our Constitution for guidance, a document written by and for white land-owning men. The needs, lives, and experiences of women were explicitly unaddressed and unprotected there. Women were not considered citizens, and that was doubly true for women of color, who are not only seen as not citizens, but more often than not were enslaved. And now, our current Supreme Court, although this, of course, is last spring's Supreme Court, very happy to have Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson rounding this out. But, you know, a 200-year history of it generally exclusively for and by white cisgender men are looking back at that time as the light that they follow. And in doing so, dimming the light of freedom and autonomy for so many of the rest of us. That decision encapsulates what they are thinking, looking backward to preserve their power structures that have kept a few in and most of us out. But we cannot look backward. We have to look forward. And abortion care is the start of that looking forward, because abortion care access is what opens the door to gender equity and racial equity and a more just future. Abortion access and reproductive and family planning access is what ensures that women can enter the workforce on an equal footing. It's the door that opens up leadership in the economy and government for us, the door that opens up economic security for families. It's the door to health and wellness and the recognition that a woman's body and women's lives matter. It's the door to a fuller vision of what women's lives can be and mean. Twice in my life, I was grateful to access safe abortion, once to allow me to complete my education and begin a career that I love, and once to allow me to survive an incomplete miscarriage. These are the doors that others walk through every day. Abortion care is essential to gender equity, and no matter what, we are not letting that door close. So like you, I'm scared of what comes next, but this is not just about fear. We also have to make this about our hope. The Maine Women's Lobby was founded in 1978 by a regular group of women who organized themselves into a group of change makers. They altered the course of legislative history and the path of gender equity in Maine and created ripples across the state for decades. In just their second year, in 1979, they organized against the anti-choice movement for the first time in their history and the first organized time in Maine's history. One of the other ripples they created was the Reproductive Privacy Act in Maine in 1993, which protects abortion access in Maine even without Roe. Now we're grateful to have organizations like Planned Parenthood and Family Planning, GER, but in 1993, it was just the Women's Lobby and a scrappy group of change makers. And so we can use that as a light to remind ourselves that this is our opportunity to continue to be change makers, and we know how to do it. We can continue to grow those muscles. We can look to our legislative elders, to our youth, to our community members on the front lines fighting for racial and gender equity, trans people, Black and brown women, Indigenous women, and we can look to each other. We know that Roe was never the final answer because a more just and gender equitable future cannot lie in the hands of 9 people, most of them cis white men. A government with most of the branches still being pale, male, and stale was never going to protect all of our rights, and the patriarchy is not going to dismantle itself. So only we can do that. And we can do that together, and we have examples of the way it's happening. In the last legislature, we pushed back on bills that would have rolled back main care funding for abortion access, bills that would have required scripts and ultrasounds and everything that you hear. Most heinously, a bill that would have required the burial or cremation of fetal remains, no matter how you came to have them. But together, we were a bulwark against those rollbacks. And together, we have transformed legislative systems and our legislature to continue to speak with and for all Mainers. It's a legislature that's now more representative than it's ever been. Maine is in the top tier of gender representation, and we have more people of color running now than ever before. And the results are showing in terms of what we're able to pass for legislation. Just this year, we were successful in forcing insurance companies to pay for pelvic floor exams that happen as a result of birth. And yes, that is a reproductive justice issue. Before that, they were considered cosmetic surgeries and not necessarily covered. We were successful in passing expanded postpartum care for up to 12 months instead of just 6 weeks. We eliminated the use of mandatory non-disclosure agreements, which protect discrimination and sexual harassment. We've built increased systems for racial equity, transformed our childcare system, expanded access to fertility care, expanded access to period care, eliminated the tampon tax. I could go on and on about the successes, and those successes are not an accident. They are the result of people like you, people like us, working together to make sure we make our vision and our dream a reality. And we do that at the ballot box. For every bill that goes forward, good or bad, there is an elected official conceiving it, filing it, presenting it in committee and on the floor. And we have an opportunity in the next 8 weeks to usher in the next group of change makers, to make sure they know what's on our mind, to make sure that we recognize abortion access as a keystone to our rights. You'll have an opportunity as voters to potentially bring in a school board that understands the power of safe, inclusive schools, city councilors that understand climate safe communities, and for sure a chance to vote for a House rep, state senator, governor, and congressperson. And this is our opportunity to make sure those candidates represent our values and that we are not looking back at the past and the status quo, but that we're looking to make sure our dream becomes a reality. And if we can't vote for those people, we can be them. We deserve a space from the bottom to the top of the ticket and a government that looks like us. So we know a different future is possible. I don't even remember where I am in my slides now. I'm getting excited. If you are interested in other kinds of legislation like that, we do have legislative report cards giving you details on all of these and our votes and different votes. So we know that another future is possible, and so do they. And that's why they're so mad. But we also know rage is tinder, hope is fuel. Let your rage and our fear about abortion access right now and over the last few months be the spark that ignites our actions. But we need to let the magic and power and hope of our dreams fuel those efforts for generations, because only together will we build our power, and we cannot stop. We have to demand that our humanity, that our bodies and our autonomy be respected and protected, and fight for our feminist and anti-racist future at every turn. This November, in the next legislature, because it doesn't end in November, you got to keep those folks accountable every day, January to July. And then we've got to do it again and again this year and beyond. We're in it together, and we're not going to go back. So we invite you to join us through Mooson as partners with us, through the Maine Women's Lobby, through the Poor People's Campaign, all of these are doors that we can enter together to make sure that we're taking action. And I'm happy to include your network and all of you as individuals as we work for gender equity at the polls. We've got a monthly session or a weekly session this month in January, kind of looking behind the scenes at how to engage in elections. We'll have action every week through October. We'll have action in November, make sure that we are getting folks out to the polls. And then all the way through the legislative session, we offer weekly in-person trainings, video trainings, social media, weekly sessions about what's going on in the State House, plain language analysis of those bills, because the voting matters, but everything that comes after that matters too. And we want to be hand in hand with you, make sure we are lifting up equity everywhere we can. That's it for me, and I'd be delighted to take any questions that you have.
Oh, Dusty, I'm telling you, I'm on fire too. Thank you so much. I have a quick question to start. I'm sure the chat is going to be burning, but help us understand. We were on that fine line as a nonprofit with a C3. You have both. The Women's Lobby has a C3, which is for information and engagement. And then you have a lobby for the candidate and work. Help us connect with you on that C3 level and what we can do, particularly right now for this election. Help us understand that.
Sure. Well, I think Jason did a really nice job talking about how to help kind of navigate that during the election. I will say that it is much harder during an election to navigate the C3, C4 difference. Once you're outside the election window, things open up a little, and it's a bit less hard to navigate. So at the Women's Lobby, we are a C3 and a C4, but the vast majority of our work happens under the C3. So when it comes to analysis of bills, understanding what's happening, understanding how to have the information, the skills, and the confidence to engage as citizens and activists, the vast majority of that is C3 allowable. It does, though, depending on how conservative or cautious you are, it gets a little harder during this year or during this part of the year during election. But the key thing I always look to is making sure in general issues are always okay, but in supporting candidates or parties is not. And so that's what you're always looking for. Are we talking an issue or are we talking a candidate and party? When it comes to abortion specifically, though, there is an increasing feeling in the election law sphere that abortion is so closely identified with the Democratic Party that it is tantamount to partisan work. And so that's when you want to really be leaning in and being very careful about your focus on the issue and not connections with candidates, because you get closer and closer to the legal and ethical line if you don't have a lawyer providing you support. So I don't think that was a lot of help.
Yes, it was. Thank you. Back to Trudy.
Hi, Dusty. Thank you. And I think that last answer tied really well with some of the things Jason was talking about. So thank you. We have a comment from John. This is fantastic. Thank you, Dusty. And Jane says, thank you. In addition to your legislative scorecard, does your 501c4 publish a list of candidate endorsements?
We have not traditionally done candidate endorsements because we have worked really hard at the Women's Lobby to continue to maintain relationships with legislators of a wide variety of backgrounds and affiliations. So we've never done candidate endorsements. I increasingly am looking to that as a way to build power and the recognition that it is harder and harder to do quality nonpartisan work through no fault of our own. But our history has just been to put forward the issues and make folks aware of where candidates and legislators are on those issues.
Thank you. Michelle asks, does women's lobby work with the youth vote? Let me read that again. Does women's lobby work with the youth vote? And can you comment on what you see is their level of interest in the issues you and we care about?
We don't do youth specific voter outreach, or at least we aren't right now, but we are active with youth leadership. We have a Girls' Day at the State House, which is in its 26th year. We're coming up on our 27th year. We're actually about to expand that this year to include a larger high school component. I'm really proud of that work because it connects 8th grade girls and soon high school youth and girls and non-binary youth to legislators, to lobbyists, to activists and organizers, and help support them in following bills and figuring out how they can take action in a powerful way on bills and like how to understand when and what. I see that they are on fire for this work. You know, because they are sometimes newer to it, they don't always, you know, have the kind of context or nuance that people with a more historical view have. But Girls' Day at the State House is my absolute favorite part of the year because they got energy, they've got passion, they have commitment. It gives me the hope, you know, that I spoke to, not just the fear, to know that our world is in good hands. The youth are all right, in my opinion.
I think so too. Nancy asks whether or not we can discuss voting records.
As a 501c3, you absolutely can. You just have to be careful that you are discussing everybody's voting record equally and using the same metric. So there's and I'll pop into the chat. I'm sure you have access to Boulder Advocacy that guides for how a C3 organization can lift up voting records in a safe and legal way.
Betsy asks, does Maine Women's Lobby anticipate any specific legislation coming up in the next session, which Musan could rally our support around?
We know for sure that there will be efforts to continue to roll back abortion access. We know for sure that there are going to be continued, bills that are hatching the national energy around rolling back rights for safe and inclusive schools, rolling back trans rights, rolling back LGBTQ rights. And so I think that what has come to other places is coming to Maine as well. That folks are just seeing that those are really energizing for the other side. And so we have to continue to be energized for this side as well. I think, though, that for us, we're preparing a slate of bills that we're looking at that kind of are across the spectrum, depending on how things go in November, because I don't think we know. And it feels important to get through November before we have a sense of how much energy we need to conserve for pushing back bad bills and how much energy we have for pushing forward progressive bills.
Thank you. Suzanne asks, what specific actions is the Maine Women's Lobby taking in the midterms?
What specific actions? So we have a collection of work for the midterms. We're doing our Election Action Institute right now. That's a different session each week of the month in September. And then we'll be doing weekly group actions, both in person and remote, through the month of October. We're really working on making sure that we're building out tools and resources and messaging around care issues. I think of reproductive choice as an essential part of care and the care economy and care agenda, because the ability to decide whether and when we have children is related to how much caregiving we give in our lives. But there's really not, apart from childcare, there's not a lot happening there, and it is absolutely essential to women's economic security and wellness over the lifetime. So I don't have that ready yet, but in the next 2 weeks, we'll have a whole care voter guide, care messaging, digital outreach, and then mailers. Part of that is mailers helping people understand how to talk to candidates about care issues, and to be able to talk to their friends and neighbors about care issues, because we really think of care as something that just happens. It's just something that women do. Women just leave the workforce to provide unpaid care. And I think that there's a better way, and we need to start talking about it.
Thank you. Karen says, so bottom line, can we say we believe in supporting women's reproductive rights and urge you to consider candidates in this light, not mention the candidate, or should we take another approach?
You can absolutely say, we support reproductive rights, we support abortion access. We encourage you to reach out to candidates and ask for their positions on this. We encourage you to vote for candidates that support abortion access. That is an unquestionably C3 allowable activity.
How do you imagine that the Women's Lobby and Musan can collaborate? That's a question from Carrie.
I would love to. I know that, I see friendly faces and names across the board here. So I know that there has been engagement in the past, and hope that there will be in the future. I just joined about 6 weeks before COVID, which 2.5 years now, but I still feel like a baby in my role, and trying to navigate all of the different communities. I would love for us to, as we start building out our legislative agenda, to be talking in October, November, December about what our different agendas are. And there may be bills or approaches that we are able to, help lift up on your behalf, and vice versa. I think of issues like paid family and medical leave, which will be a major issue this year. 2023 is the year we're getting it done. And that's the kind of thing that I suspect Musan probably has an interest in, because it's so connected to health, wellness, economic security, and racial and gender justice. And I have no doubt you have issues like that we would support as well.
Well, thank you, Desti. This has just been inspirational. I'm so grateful for your support. And I don't know, I think you've tapped into a well of all of us in terms of hope and inspiration, because this is a challenging time, and your leadership is like a beacon. It's certainly fortified me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And
Thank you.
I hope that if you have time, you can stay for a breakout session. Whoever's lucky enough to get you in that random selection will probably wrestle you to the ground with more opportunities to collaborate, with which we look forward to doing. So I think it's now time. We're inspired, and here's what I'm thrilled about. I'm going to introduce Lane Sturdivant, who is the state organizer for the League of Women Voters of Maine. Lane has been a partner with Musan and our Democracy in Action issue group for as long as you've been with the League, and is a CVL representing the League of Women Voters, and is here to share with us, now that we're all inspired by both Jason and Desti, what can we specifically do in Maine as it relates to the midterms and partner with the League to make that happen. So Lane, thank you.
Sure. I'm going to very quickly run through some November election volunteer opportunities with the League. And then afterwards, I can, maybe if we have time, I can take some questions. Otherwise, I can talk with people in chat about connecting. But before I get to that, yeah, I'm Lane Sturdivant. My pronouns are they, them. I live in Warren and go to the UU Church in Rockland. And I'm a statewide organizer for the League. The League of Women Voters of Maine is a nonpartisan organization that works to empower and educate voters and defend an inclusive democracy. So we've got a bunch of things happening. It's our busy season. I'm gonna put this in slideshow view. All right, can everyone see that? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. This is just a list of some of the opportunities I'm going to go through. Again, when I get off screen share, I'll put some specific links and that I mention in this PowerPoint. I'll put those links into the chat so that they're more easily clickable. But these are kind of chronologically some of our top volunteer opportunities that are election related. So we are in the midst of some Vote 411, which is our nonpartisan online voter guide. We're in the midst of some research for that, looking at what is on municipal and local ballots. So next week is probably going to be a great time to finish up some of that research. I know some of you are already doing it, so thank you. But we still have probably a couple towns that haven't been covered yet, and some other towns where that ballot information is just being finalized. And then as we move into the rest of the month, we have a couple different things. We have Vote 411 Candidate Chase, which I'll talk about a little bit, Election Hotline, Neighbor to Neighbor Canvassing, which I'll talk about a little bit. Towards the end of November, or the end of September, I'm getting ahead of myself, we have Common Ground Fair. And then we also have a youth voting summit, which I'll mention a little bit. And then on election day itself, we have our election observation program. So I'm just going to quickly go through these. You probably heard of Vote 411 and that works. So just to reiterate, that is our nonpartisan online voter guide. If you're interested in helping with either the research or the candidate chase, and the candidate chase means we're going and asking the candidates to submit information. There's a series of questions that they can answer, and they can also upload a photo or their general candidate information. And a lot of candidates, that email inviting them to do it gets buried in their inbox, and we need someone to email them again, maybe call them, just kind of pester them so that there's a reminder there for them to do it, because that is valuable information for voters. So if you're interested in either the research part or the candidate chase part, you can email Evan Murray, and I'll throw his email into the chat at the end. Election Hotline is something kind of new that we're working on this year, partnering with the ACLU. If you're interested in volunteering for a shift on the hotline, I'll throw in the contact for Will, who's the one who's running it, and you're answering calls and helping voters with information. There will be trainings for that, and we'll have staff backup as well on the hotline when you take your shift. Neighbor to Neighbor is our sort of flagship door knocking voter registration program. We're in a dozen or so communities this year. And so I'll throw the link in so you can see which dates and which locations, so you could sign up for a specific canvas. But we're knocking on doors to talk to voters or potential voters and get them connected to resources about when the election's happening, what's on their ballot, and potentially even registering them at the door. Common Ground, we will be there tabling, and I would really invite you to stop by at the very least. But if you're going to Common Ground anyway, and you're maybe willing to take a few hour shift, we could use some volunteers. You'll be tabling with staff, so you can kind of take breaks and also like chat with our staff while you're at the table. And we specifically need someone for Saturday morning. So I have a couple tickets as well. If you volunteer, I can give you free admission. And then Youth Voting Summit. This is happening September 30th. It's a Friday at Kennebec Valley Community College up in Hinckley. And we need some volunteers to help with various parts of that event setup and management. And I'll throw that form into the chat. But that is for high school and college students and high school and college age young people. And then finally, election observation is the one that we do on election day. It's our nonpartisan way of looking at how the election is going and being at polling places across the state. And then those observers submit reports, and we aggregate that information and put it out to the media and sort of verify how the election went, which in Maine, you know, it's usually confirming the message that it is safe and secure and that voters do have access to voting in our state. So if we have time, we might not have time. I can answer questions. Otherwise, I'm going to throw some links and contact info in the chat, and you can DM me if you need to like connect about any of those in particular, or if you want more information.
Thank you very much, Lane. I don't think we have time for a Q&A, but I'm sure some of these ideas will be discussed when we go into breakout rooms. And we will definitely keep track of those and get back to you or move people directly to you. It's very exciting work. I mean, the League of Women Voters of Maine, I can't say how exciting it has been for Mooson to be partnering with you all. You're leaders in the country for the League of Women Voters, and I want folks here to realize that, to really move the League into a much more progressive and values-driven social justice context. So thanks again. So you keep putting things in the chat and we can keep those recorded and distribute them back out to people if they need them or want them. I think it's now time for us to go into our breakout rooms. Reba is going to separate us, and we're going to take a 5-minute bio break if we need it. So Reba, this is to you.
Yeah, so I have everyone assigned to various breakout rooms. I'll open those rooms and you'll just click to go over into it. If you aren't able to do that, I'll move you over. So don't worry about it, or you can just stay here with me. And if you have any issues, I'm going to stay back in this like central room. So you can always come out and check in with me. And I'll send a 1-minute warning when we're getting ready to wrap up. So I'll shift you over, then you guys should take your breaks. And if you have any issues, stay with me, and look forward to hearing the reports back afterwards. So if you have any questions, I'm going to open the rooms now. Carrie, the focus of the groups is, well, everybody's gone. Hi, Corliss. Oh, you're muted here. Just a sec.
I'm sorry, you caught me in the act of leaving the program. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
See you another time. Okay.
Yeah, take care.
You can't hear. People are muted.
No, you're not. I can hear you.
I couldn't hear Julie.
Whoever just said Reba, I'm muted.
Woo, that's a lot of activity on the screen.
Boom, boom, boom.
Boom, boom, boom. Welcome back. Have we got everybody back from the breakout rooms?
No.
Let's just see if they're all here. It's up to you, Reba, to let me know if the breakout rooms are all back.
Oh, they're all
They're
here.
all-
Everyone's here.
They're all closed. Either they left or they're here.
I know. That's the danger of a bio break, but
I think some people had other, some
Sure.
of us were used to the 12, the 10 to 12, so some of them had other
sure.
commitments.
Well, I'm thrilled that we have all of us here who are gathered. So right now, we're going to spend a few minutes from the folks in the breakout rooms to share, just do popcorn style. Those of you who took notes or were facilitators, just to tell us the highlights of what you all shared, what your conversations were about. You have to unmute yourself and please don't be shy.
Jane Danielson, we were group 1. You want to share some highlights from our group?
Certainly, and I hope you, Jane Makala, will jump in with this too. So we talked first about phone banking, and I think there was a feeling that phone banking can be tough, but people want to know more about doing text banking, particularly, and also postcard writing is always an option. There was a question about what the National UU the Vote website might show in terms of resources. There was a question about, well, I can't really actively canvass, but what can I do just from my home? There were folks who thought that what the League of Women Voters is doing in terms of its 411 effort initiative, where the 411 initiative shows the positions of candidates, and then one can make congregations can make a connection between those positions and what local candidates then where their values lie, where their positions lie in relation to that. the emphasis too was on the importance of stories, about being able to connect with people on the basis of personal stories. And there was an idea about voter registration drives for high school students. And it turns out that in Maine, when folks get a driver's license, they will now be automatically registered to vote. And then there was a lot of emphasis too on making banners or signs for your lawn that say, and that generate the idea of vote your values, not taking a particular position for a particular candidate, but just vote your values. Jane, could you add to that?
Just on the tail of what Jane said about signs, and that was a request that maybe you, Maine, you, the vote, figure out perhaps a couple of these signs and where churches could order them so we could get them to plant in the front yard of our churches. And a couple of our churches have already used the front of the church as a billboard, in effect, for the voting message by putting it, if they've got steps going up to the front door of the church, information about voting your values and how you can register to vote, actually on each tread, each riser for the stairs going up, colorful, bright colors. My church does it in multiple languages. That it's a great thing as people drive by. It's eye-catching and just a great reminder of what the church stands for in terms of voting your values. Thanks. Anybody else from group one? Did we miss anything critically important? Okay, thanks.
I can go, Julia.
Sure, just anybody can jump in. This is
Okay.
popcorn, so you go.
Yeah, just like I
our-
was going to share one thing quickly
Go, Reba.
here.
Yep.
I bet you it's going to be the photograph of the Yarmouth
It
Church.
should be, although it's not coming up.
Let me see.
There we go.
There you go.
That's the Yarmouth Church. And they did that in like 5 days. Came up with that idea.
Love that. Love that. Want to copy that. So our group was pretty interesting. I thought we had 2 congregational voting liaisons, which was great. We had a new minister to the Brunswick Church, Karma, who was delightful to meet. And we have a former legislator who was also on the steering committee of Musan, who is now running for Senate. So, and Julia and Trudy, we had a great discussion. And just to mention some of the things, I have to look at my notes here. We're interested, basically our group obviously is interested in all the issues that Musan is working for, the 4 issue groups, health care, climate, galvanizing the community, and democracy. We talked about a little bit, how can people of faith make a difference in this election cycles around values-driven conversations? What is the role? And one idea is to have house parties, which really goes back to the League of Women Voters, person to person or neighbor to neighbor effort. And that's really important to expand our community caucuses and really bringing our communities together more. And we can start in our church groups and then we can expand from there. But this idea of community caucuses made me also think about, from my work with Betsy and Democracy in Action group here at Musan, is this idea for Musan members to get involved in creating in the caucuses of our legislators. Like, we can bring community people from our churches and our neighborhoods to work with our legislators in a caucus type environment. In other words, we want to be involved at the very beginning of the legislative session, maybe as you're talking about bills. And so, Betsy, are you looking a little puzzled? Am I not being clear? That's
Sorry.
okay. I'm watching your face.
Yeah, good. I do that. Yeah. So with this I'm just curious about what this what caucuses you're talking about. So our legislators caucus with each other in their,
We sometime make a way for ourselves to be part of caucusing like lobbyists do. I think Penny talked about that a little bit. The same way that lobbyists get involved. Penny, do you want to elaborate?
yeah.
Sure.
Take it.
So when I got to the legislature in 2015, we had caucuses all the time, information sharing, and it was lobbyists and legislators. And there are so many of us that just didn't think we had the whole picture. And we didn't think we could really move. So we started including nonprofits, we started including community leaders, we started involving the whole community and started laying the groundwork for change, even though it might not come that session, but for the next session or the session afterwards. So my understanding is we still have those community caucuses. So it's not just lobbyists and legislators. So that's a great way to get involved, find out what's going on, galvanize your own community. So good.
Yeah, I'm just, how do we learn about those community caucuses? Where do we go?
Okay, well, and that's a good question. So so the progressives pretty much did this and they organized it, but they also had both parties and independents involved. So you should be able to ask your senator or legislator to start. And they will then know who else to ask. But you have all the officers of the House and the Senate that know all of the caucuses and all the different committees and everything like that. So, I mean, there are further ways to go, but I would start with my rep or senator.
Also, Penny, if I may suggest, we can contact the League of Women Voters because they
Absolutely.
are active. They're the active participants in these caucuses. So Betsy, let's go back to the Democracy and Issue Group, and we can probably take that to the next step.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also what I got from that conversation is to don't hold back. Insert ourselves in the process.
Yes.
And Luton is doing that. We are doing that, and we need to keep doing more of it. You know, democracy is calling us to do this right now, to get more involved than we ever have been, and we need to do it.
Yes.
I'll go next. We were group 2, I think, a small group, and some of us knew each other pretty well, but that was fine. Around the group, there was great interest in the reproductive justice issues, gun safety, and the climate came up a number of times. People still very interested in climate issues and wanting to be sure that they don't fall away this year, which they certainly won't. And Indigenous people, Indigenous rights also came up as individuals' interests. One of our members had attended the UUA, UU the Vote workshop on reproductive justice, which I don't know if any of you others attended. It was a 3-part workshop apparently, and it was Carrie, and she reported about the important distinction that they were making between reproductive justice and abortion rights, and the need to broaden our thinking about this to be reproductive justice and not just abortion rights, and sort of how that shift in language as well as focus is probably going to be is perhaps more successful or less confrontational for some people and that sort of thing, which I thought was pretty interesting. And that as a resource is available, called something the UUA Living Document, and something for us to look into, but clearly is going to be, Julia, you maybe already know about this.
I put the link in the chat.
Oh, okay, great. All right. So I thought that was something, it's already happened, but it's something that people might want to use as a resource. We talked quite a bit about resources, as well as the League. The Environmental Voter Project came up, which is something that the UU the Vote Maine is partnering with them. And then in general, we talked further, which I'm hearing echoed in both of the previous speakers groups, is the importance of building relationships. And the first speaker we had talked about advocacy and work being really about building relationships as much as anything. And I think that that is really very important. And we talked about having, Lynn talked about how their health issue group has regular communications with the partners to be sure that they're enrolled with the partners and that we're not just using partner resources in a vacuum, and that we develop those relationships with our partners in their meetings however we can. And another idea that came out around similar to building relationships was, I think it was Lane who had the idea of for doing a neighbor to neighbor, if you were interested in doing that, but people are kind of nervous about that or not sure they wanted to do that, start that off in your congregation as perhaps a social event where you people who are interested in learning about, interested in doing that might get together and have lunch somewhere or do something, just get together as a sort of social event, learn about how to do it, find a partner to do it with, and sort of, again, build the relationships within your congregation with this focus and with this work in mind, but not have it be, we're going to just about that. And that more people want that kind of community and want those kind of relationships. And that seemed like an interesting idea to me too. I'm looking and not seeing anything else on my paper. So I guess that's it. Does anybody from our group have anything that they want to add to that? Okay.
I'm curious, is there another group that needs to report out? I don't know how many groups we had.
Yeah, Merit for group 3.
Hi, yeah. So group 3, we had mostly the Portland churches represented, John for Allen Avenue, Marcy Mackinnon and myself for First Parish, and Karen Chess for the Peaks Island Church, the New Bracket Church. And then we had Suzanne from Bangor and Rick from Belfast. We started out with sharing what different churches are doing and what individuals are doing. Allen Avenue they have people sign up for neighbor to neighbor campaign. And John personally is getting involved with some of the 411 research. Suzanne reported from Bangor that they're doing a You the Vote service on October 2nd. And some people are signing up also for the neighbor to neighbor campaign. And they are coordinating some candidate forums with League of Women Voters. Peaks Island, New Bracket Church is having a service on democracy next Sunday, and then a voter registration drive. They also want to reach out to new island residents who moved there over the past year to get them to register to vote. And some people are getting signing up for shifts at Common Ground Fair and canvassing at Avesta. First Parish, Marcy Mackinnon is the main chair or lead for the Poor People's Campaign. So they want to coordinate with You the Vote and Marcy had a conversation with Reverend Elaine, our interim minister, yesterday to open up the church for candidate forums, especially in Portland. There's also a number of citizens referenda on the ballot and 8 amendments proposed by the Charter Commission, and there's a lot of misinformation out there on that. So the Portland church is also open up sort of to Q&A forums on that. And in Portland, October 11th will be the first day of in-person voting. Rick recorded from Belfast that he's not much aware of what the church is doing. He himself is supporting a candidate on canvassing. I reported a little bit on what Musa and what the co-chairs are doing, especially what Jane Makala is working on. We're putting together some documents to put on the Musan website that give access to links to people in preparation to the new legislative session. So it's easier to figure out how to follow a bill and how to advocate for something and how to submit testimony and so forth. But there's also some other general links in there. We talked a little more about the whole question of the nonprofit status and where the limits are. And Rick shared the real rules, which are a UU document on sort of explaining the boundaries of what and what we cannot do at UUs. And I'm gonna put, I found the link and put that in the chat. So that's more, we didn't get so much into what our, what the issues and values are that we focus on, more like what we're doing and what the options are. If anybody wants to add something, go ahead.
I would say that we had 3 CVLs among us, which was nice to know. And we described what a CVL was, another acronym, yes. There was a lot of activity that was candidate oriented, and so and it reveals a common dynamic in a lot of UU churches where people feel it's more important that they support a particular candidate. So we talked about the need for people who aren't doing that to know the opportunities for nonpartisan work, as was said by some of the other groups. What else? Anybody else?
Well, I think we're going to get those notes. So thank you all for taking them. I want to try to keep us on track here for time, if I may. And I'm grateful to all of you who are sticking with us all the way to the conclusion. We have 2 really important things to chat about. So I'm going to ask Michelle to come on board and tell us about Musan's, what? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I thought Reba was to talk to us about the 10th anniversary celebration.
Okay, thank you. Very excited about this. The 10th anniversary of Musan happens this year. And in November, oh, look at that. In November, we're dedicating our network meeting specifically to celebrating Musan and the strength of Musan. And we will be honoring some of the founders of Musan, including Reverend Carrie Johnson, who was the minister of the UU Church in Augusta. So she'll be there in person, which is really exciting. This meeting will be in person. And, it's just really important. We want to get the word out. The word is getting out already. You'll see invitations coming out soon. We've been told we should let the UUA know, because to have a 10th anniversary for such a strong organization is important, and they would want to know. So it'll be a great time to network and just, again, get more jazzed about this wonderful organization. And I just want to, again, thank Trudy Ferland for starting Musan with Carrie and many others, and for Julia coming on soon after that, and the 2 of them being the co-chairs for almost the whole time of Musan, and got us to this place. And I think Musan knows no bounds right now. We're kind of taking off. We got a lot of good energy. And so just watch for that. You'll get the invitations in your church, and we're all excited about it. Jane, did I cover enough?
Well, that's a good segue. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Can I-
And
if anyone-
now we're going.
Never mind.
No, what do you got?
Now we're going to Jane, who's next up, to share with us about how we can support Musan. Please, Jane.
This has been such an incredibly positive meeting. You will be glad to know I am not going to end it with a doom and gloom message. In fact, the first bit of information I want to share is the good news that Musan has switched over to a new comprehensive database system that includes a terrific new donor component that makes the whole process of donating electronically simpler for you, and so much simpler and more efficient record keeping wise for us. I test drove it yesterday, was delighted to find that it even produces an immediate email receipt for your records for your donation. So enough about bringing Mooson into the 21st century electronically. Mooson is in decent shape financially for the moment. So I'm not going to exhort you to donate in order to prevent imminent collapse of Mooson. But I am going to ask you to think about what it means for Mooson to be a statewide network. Indeed, as Julia mentioned early in this meeting, the only statewide organization linking Maine's 2,000 plus members of UU congregations, and probably some other independent UUs not affiliated with a congregation. So Maine considers about 525 of those 2,000 plus to be part of our network community now, meaning we maintain contact with them through our email list in much the same fashion as you all probably learned about this morning's meeting. Of those 525, only 75 provided any financial support to Mooson in calendar 2021. We've added about 7 new donors in 2022 so far. That makes only 82 of 525, less than 16% of us. We don't have an extravagant budget, only about $32,000 a year, about 70% of which goes to cover staff costs. Our half-time administrator, Reba, who is worth her weight in gold, I want to tell you. And the fees we pay to our fiscal sponsor of 10 years, the UU Church in Augusta, for their services and rental of office space. We raise every bit of that ourselves from congregational and individual donations. We're not a chapter of anything bigger that gets funded by the national organization. We raise the money that we live on. In 2021, those single individual donations ranged from $10 to $2,500. About 20 of our donors make their donations in the form of monthly donations, monthly payments. That's hugely helpful to us for cash flow purposes. Those monthly donations range from $5 a month. A cup of coffee at Starbucks will cost you that much, almost, if you put anything in it. Range from $5 a month to $100 a month. We know that not everyone has discretionary income to make charitable contributions. Thus far, we've resisted fee-based membership that some of our other states, State Action Network, use. We have not done that. Nor are we asking you to make a sacrificial level donation. Your giving amounts are totally your business. But we are a network, a UU community that stretches all the way across this state to engage in faith-based advocacy. And as the theme of today's meeting makes crystal clear, we are all in this together. And together we have power beyond anything we could contemplate as individuals. So if you are not a current financial supporter, and I know from your names that a lot of you already are, but if you are not yet, and you have the means to become one, when today's meeting ends, I am asking you to visit Mooson's website, mooson.org, follow the instructions to donate to support this network that allows us to work collectively for a more just and equitable Maine. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jane.
Can I just quickly pop in and say that I know that many of you are monthly recurring donors, and thank you so much. And I will be in touch with you in over the next couple of weeks to talk about transitioning your monthly donation from PayPal to our new system. Super, super duper easy. It's just a new system, and it can't automatically translate. So hopefully that will happen smoothly and we won't have any big hiccups in our budget. And thank you. Betsy.
Thank you, Reba.
I just I'll do this offline. I was just going to suggest that maybe that information come to all of your donors and not just your ones who do monthly, because maybe if it were easier to do, some of us would do monthly instead of once a year.
Yeah,
sure. Thank you. And Suzanne, quickly.
I just wanted to say that we do a half plate at least once a year for Mooson at our church, and that's a good way to contribute.
It's true. That's right. Many of our churches do that too. So I'm grateful. We're all grateful for that support. All right, before we close with our closing words, Trudy's going to lead us, and this is really important because it's going to be a responsive reading. Reba, can you and Trudy stay on? As everybody gets off, I want just 3 minutes of our time to wrap up the follow-up for this meeting. If I could ask you both to just stay on for just a couple of seconds. So Trudy, I'm going to turn this over to you, my dear.
Thank you. We talked about the weekly congregational voting liaison meetings, and a couple weeks ago, we decided that we would start each weekly meeting with this pledge. And so we decided that we would share that pledge with you, have you all say it with us as a responsive reading. And so I will read a short phrase and you will repeat. And the pledge starts as aware of suffering and injustice.
Aware of suffering. Everybody
And
unmute.
injustice.
Everybody unmute.
I, and then say your name.
I, Julia Patel,
Am working to create.
am working to create
A more just, peaceful, and sustainable world.
A more
just,
peaceful, and sustainable world.
I promise, for the benefit of all,
I promise
for the benefit of all,
to practice self-care,
to practice
self-care,
mindfulness, healing, and joy.
mindfulness, healing,
Joy.
I vow to not burn out.
I vow
To not
burn
out.
May it be so. Go forth, everyone.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
your weekend.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Um,